I can't tell you how many meetings I have sat in where people are like, how do we get young people to care about the news? Nobody reads the newspaper, and you've been able to crack that code because it does seem like younger people. I mean, certainly my kids are Gen Z and they want to know what's going on in the world, but they don't respond to what's on CNN, and they may not be, reading the Washington Post even online. So how do you get through to them and engage people in a way that seems to be a mystery for so much of the news industry?
So I think it comes down to the fact that young people reject authority, and the mainstream and legacy media is an authority figure, and they present as an authority. And that's part of, their job and aesthetic is you have the suit, you have the big glass table, you got the fancy graphics, you've got the televisions, you've got experts and serious people on to give you serious news. Young people reject authority. So this just isn't their vibe. They're like, this doesn't feel like it's for me. I feel like I'm in class or I'm getting yelled at. I don't like it. So I took that, and you look at the studio, the visual experience I have here. It's very saturated colors. It brings in a little bit of like, even the Abe Lincoln has become his own little superstar on the show. I'll wear like a hoodie. I used to wear a suit, but it was always like a bright, very saturated blue suit with very interesting ties. My hair, my whole look is very coded for young people in a sense. Like it's meant to be more peer and less authority. And that's because I am a peer and not an authority. At least when I started, that's how it was. And so I think that makes sense. And I had the great benefit of growing up at a time when we had Channel 1 News in my school every morning. So I was used to seeing Suchin Pak and Anderson Cooper in a more relaxed form delivering the news to me, trusting me as a young person with civics and current events. So I knew that young people could be trusted. I also think about like Linda Ellerby, who did Nick News for even younger children, and how important that was to my development when I was watching her, or how MTV News really developed me through high school and college, and how I looked to those people for like, not just to include what was happening on the global and US politics scale, but to talk about like fun stuff I wanted to know about, like the economics of spring break or what was going on in pop culture. And so we bring in that kind of vibe to everything. And I think that experience I had with the news as it was given to me is something that I'm trying to create for Gen Z, because they don't have MTV. There's not like MTV for their generation. It's YouTube. They don't have, this idea that adults trust young people with information is sort of been distorted, and it's a little like do as I say. And young people throughout human history reject authority. So I always come at it almost from a gossip lens, where I might be saying the same thing that NBC or CNN or the Washington Post is saying, but I'm saying it in a way that feels more conversational and makes people feel included. And I think that's the secret to reaching young people.
Interesting. And you also wear the hat of being an activist as well. And that's a break from how traditional news has operated. And there's a growing tension. There has been, probably dating back to like blogs in the early 2000s, where a lot of people came more from the activists, the citizen journalist sphere. But we have a growing independent journalism movement. You're on TikTok, YouTube, social media. And I think in the time of Trump, there are some people who do come from legacy media that are starting to rethink that a little bit, because so much is at stake. Basic civil rights, our democracy. And so I'm really curious to hear from you about what your thoughts are on all of this and your approach.
In the last 10 years, certainly, since Trump, for this generation, the idea that a fairness doctrine or telling the story from both sides is just not accurate when one side works from a place of alternate facts and a theocratic kind of fascist agenda, in my opinion. And when they see things like the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, going after trans kids, going after LGBTQ community, going after, questioning the 14th Amendment, questioning the 19th Amendment, questioning all these different things. So to say, today we're going to talk about if the 14th Amendment should be rewritten to restructure what birthright citizenship is. And on the other hand, why the 14th Amendment should be rewritten. People just don't like that. There are like, there's a social contract that we have as Americans that I think people are still very subscribed to. And it requires us to be activists in some reason, to defend that. So when there is such a massive attack on the press and the conglomeration of media outlets being owned by billionaires who are very much, have their own capitalist agenda, they are diminishing the trust that the fourth estate has, which is why I think when people say, I don't trust trad media, I don't think they mean like the actual reporters and photojournalists. They like that stuff. They don't like Jeff Bezos, or they think like he shouldn't control so much of the world or whatever. And so they're turning to these folks like me and citizen journalists because we now have the power of the cell phone. I can see Darnella Frazier and the Black Lives Matter and the taping of George Floyd's murder, I think was really the first time that young people and all people really were like, wow, the police said one thing, the news said another, and I watched it happen. So I can be the judge of what's right and wrong and what's fact and what's not fact. And so I think as we get more into that, that's where we see people more interested in the citizen journalist thing. But I don't think it's that they're totally rejecting traditional media. And I think there is a place for people who are, just here to do the facts and nothing else. But on the other hand, sometimes you have to do what's right. So I get where people struggle with this. I don't struggle with it because I've built it into the brand. I mean, I'm a gay woman. I'm going to have strong feelings about protecting gay marriage. I'm going to have strong feelings about the 19th Amendment. And for me to try and hide that or both sides it, I think it just comes off as disingenuous to the audience. And that's why they like to see this activism. They want to see me at a No Kings rally, not because they're woke leftists, but because I'm a part of the Fourth Estate, and the Fourth Estate's job is to hold truth and power accountable. And nothing says that like no kings, So I don't know. It's a tricky world, though. I see where we're all struggling to navigate it.
Yeah. And I mean, none of us were really prepared to be where we're at today.
No.
So there's not a manual, and, they did not teach this in J school, even if you went there. So.
Right. Well, and I will say the J schools are starting to come around a little bit here. I think that there was this idea, at least even 5-6 years ago, when I was talking at schools, and they were like, well, we don't teach people to have their opinions be so public. They're supposed to be the storyteller, not a part of the story. And I'm like, but if the authority of being able to be the storyteller means you're a part of the story, or you're transparent about your place in the story, journalists aren't robots, that's going to become more and more important. And I have seen in the last 2 years that I've been at schools where they're starting to recognize that there needs to be humanity in the humanity arts. And so, they're letting people be a little bit more of that.